Hello, everybody. I'm Krista Neher, and welcome to, I almost stepped on something behind me, but welcome to our session on personal branding. This is a topic that I have a lot of passion for because what you'll discover in our time together today is that having a strong personal brand can absolutely transform the opportunities that are attracted to you. And one of the things that I think is really important to consider is that creating your personal brand is really about investing in yourself. And so many times we feel like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do this, and we're always running around, right? But when you think about your personal brand, this is an investment that will give you benefits through your entire professional career. And I'm going to share with you a little bit of my journey. But what I find so amazing is that by being a little more strategic about my personal brand, making the effort to amplify things, now the opportunities that I want are consistently coming to me. And I don't know what I might be doing in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, but I do know that the brands that I've built and the audience that I've built as a part of that will have benefits for me. And as an author, you may be looking to sort of establish your brand right now, but you also want to think about what are all the things that you want to do down the road. And that's where personal branding really becomes important. So what we want to think about with personal brand isn't just about maybe a specific need you have right now. Hey, I need to sell copies of my book, or I need to build an audience to launch my book. We want to think more broadly around how are you strategically building an asset, which is you, that will bring you opportunities for the rest of your career. So I'm excited to show you today exactly how to do it and give you some food for thought. As we get started, make sure that you have a pen and paper handy because I'm going to ask you to actually write some things down and start thinking about certain areas where you can grow your brand. So get a pen and paper handy so you're ready to take advantage of it. Also, feel free to ask questions as we go. You can type your questions in the chat and they'll come to me as we go. I'll save a little bit of time at the end for Q&A as well. But I love to hear what's on your mind. So certainly don't hesitate to share any questions that you have as we go. So let's dive in and get started. Now, I already told you a little bit about who I am, but essentially I've been focused on personal branding now for about 10 or 12 years. And I started off building my personal brand a little out of necessity. But what's truly amazing is that when I look at this slide, right, and I think, man, I've done all this stuff, and I look at these opportunities, what I consistently see is that the opportunities that I had came to me because of the personal brand that I built. And so by building a strong personal brand and by amplifying the things that I do, all of these opportunities came to me. For example, the first book that I wrote was called The Social Media Field Guide. After I published that book, I got an email from someone who had a contract to write the first textbook on social media. And he said, well, I saw the strategy content you already had. Would you be interested in collaborating on this book? Absolutely. I also wrote a dummies book. The way that opportunity came to me was that I had published a book called Visual Social Media Marketing. The dummies people had decided they wanted to do a book about visual social marketing. They found the book I had already written and asked if I would be able to work with them to publish a dummies book. Most of the global speaking opportunities I've had have come through people searching for me and finding me online. The same is true with my media appearances. I was on CNN and that opportunity literally came. Somebody was searching for, I don't remember what, but that was how that opportunity came to me. So the thing that you'll see is that by putting out there what it is you want, the opportunities that you want will attract themselves to you. And the thing to keep in mind is my company, Bootcamp Digital, the same strategies that work for a business also work for an individual, right? So as we think about personal branding, I always look at, well, how do businesses grow? What leads someone to choose one brand over another? And then how do I apply that to myself? And I'm going to show you today the strategies that the biggest businesses in the whole world use. And I'll show you exactly how to apply those to yourself. So before we talk strategically about social media and personal branding and how you can get started, I have a question for you, and you can type yes or no into the chat window. Do you love your LinkedIn photo? And the reason I'm asking this is because I recently was actually with LinkedIn, and they gave me some photo tips that I wanted to share with you so that even in the first 5 minutes of this presentation, you have something that you can act on. So some of you are saying, yes, my photo is amazing. And other people say, nah. So LinkedIn gave me some tips on how to take the perfect profile photo. And I want to share those with you because here's the thing. Your profile photo is the most important part of your personal branded presence. This is what communicates who you are and what you're all about. So you want to be strategic with this. Studies actually show that recruiters are paid to assess people for a living, right? Recruiters judge candidates more on their photo than any of the content in their profile. So I'm not saying your LinkedIn profile doesn't matter. Obviously, the words matter, but your profile photo is what sets the stage. So obviously, you need a professional looking headshot. We're in a magical, perfect age where you can get a perfect headshot just with your phone. But let me share with you how to create the perfect photo. The first is chin down. Now, if there's any selfie experts out there, people always say put your chin up to try and reduce your under chin from showing, right? Like you don't want all these rolls showing. But the reason you want your chin down is it actually makes your eyes look bigger. And eyes, there's my eyes, but our eyes are one of the biggest connection points that we have with people. So chin down, it puts your eyes more focused, and that actually increases the connectedness through the eyes within your photo. The second thing is drop your shoulders. So you don't want to be drop your shoulders. It also sort of elongates your neck. It's a nice, easy one. Make sure you're smiling. There's a lot of studies that have been done where they looked at profile photos of people not smiling and smiling, and they found consistently that people rated higher the photos with a smile. So always make sure you are smiling in your photos. The other one is lean forward a little bit. So by leaning into the camera, so there we go, chin down, drop my shoulders, smile, lean in. By leaning in a little bit, it increases that connectedness, right? Because you're kind of leaning into the camera. So it increases that connection. And then another tip you can try is actually taking it from a side angle like this, looking over your shoulder, and mix it up to try and get the perfect LinkedIn photo. So I got these tips directly from LinkedIn. We experimented with them and we found we were actually getting better quality photos by doing this. So now you have everything that you need to get the best photos out there. I want to give you an opportunity to get a free copy of my book, Launch Yourself. So I'm going to talk about personal branding today. It's based on the book, Launch Yourself. If you would like a copy of the book, we'll give away a free copy today. All you need to do is share an insight from this session, tag me and ReadersMagnet, and we will choose the most compelling insight, and we'll just send you a free book, absolutely free. So sharing is caring. Post your insights on social media. Obviously tag us so we can see what resonates with you and what you're learning. And maybe you'll be the lucky winner to get a free book. Okay, so how many of you remember MySpace? If you were on MySpace, type I was on MySpace into the chat. And so I can see some of you were on MySpace. But I started my personal brand journey back when I was on MySpace. So LinkedIn was really just taking off. It was pre-Facebook. And this is literally a shot from my MySpace account. So when I looked at this, I felt, okay, there's nothing overly offensive here. But if someone is connecting me with in a professional context, Is this the way I want to represent myself? Am I putting my best foot forward? And I think we can all look at this and say, no. So I started thinking, okay, how do I want to be perceived? And what should I be putting out there to build that perception? And so I started a blog. And I was so good at personal branding. I don't know if you can see the URL of this, but my blog was thisiswhyimhot.wordpress.com. So that song, This Is Why I'm Hot, if you know that, that was super popular at the time. This seemed hysterical to me. But this was my first attempt to up my professional game. So obviously I wasn't doing a very good job. The reason I'm showing you my sort of embarrassing social media presence is because one of the things to keep in mind is this is an iterative process. So regardless of where you are on your journey, the goal is to get a little better, a little better, a little better. And there's aspects of my personal brand that I think are very strong. For example, consistency. If you look me up, the way I look right now, you're going to find me looking basically like this everywhere. So I'm pretty good at consistency. I have a pretty good sense of, my professional accomplishments that I want to highlight and things like that. But over time, I've worked on specific areas and I've gotten ideas from other people. So this was my first starting point. Obviously, I realized pretty quickly this wasn't serving the best purpose. And now if you look me up, this is what you'll find. Here's why this is important. So a couple years back, I did a radio interview on NPR. And at the end of it, a couple of days later, I get a phone call from this woman. And she's like, Krista, I heard your interview on NPR and it was amazing. And I Googled you and I couldn't believe how lucky we were that someone with your skills is right here in Cincinnati. And I remember the exact minute I was sitting in my car and I thought, like, how does she think, look, what is she talking about, right? And I said, yes, lucky you, I'm in Cincinnati. But I was really surprised. And I asked her, I said, yeah, how did you get to this, conclusion? And she was like, well, I Googled you. And what's funny to me, like I had this moment where I thought, this lady who's never met me, heard me somewhere, Googled me, and the stuff that she found made her think I'm this amazing big deal person. Now, here's the thing that's kind of funny, is everything she's looking at, I put there about myself, right? It's all just stuff that I put out there. And you could look at my personal brand and say, okay, Krista, but you've written all these books. You have all these media appearances, but you can too. Everyone starts somewhere. When I started with my personal brand, I didn't have all those things. I started with what I was strong in, and I'm going to show you how to uncover your strengths and the unique things you want to share. But the point here is that by the way I chose to present myself and the things that I put about myself online, she thought I was this big deal. And to me, the idea of personal branding is that when somebody meets me, I want to start here. Right? Like, so if she hadn't Googled me or if she Googled me and just had found my LinkedIn profile, I'd be starting neutral. Instead, I go into that meeting and she thinks I'm like the cat's meow. She thinks I'm great. All I need to do then is not screw it up. And so that's what we want to be thinking about as a personal brand. Now, the key to success is to really be thinking about what are the opportunities you want and how do you attract those to you. I mentioned already, most of the biggest opportunities that I've had have come directly from my personal brand. One of the caveats that I want to give you before we dive into self-discovery is don't feel like your personal brand needs to fit in a specific box. Here's what I mean by that. Sometimes people say, oh, well, your brand is so professional. How do I get more professional? Don't do me, do you, right? Figure out what it is about you that people connect with, because there's lots of ways to achieve the same goal. If we think of the biggest brands in the world, if you look, I like to talk about coffee, Dunkin Donuts versus Starbucks. If we think about Dunkin Donuts and Starbucks, they're doing the same thing. They're both selling coffee, but they do it in very different ways. Both effective, both done in different ways. if you think about some of the people and brands you admire or that are successful, what you'll see is people do it in different ways. And when I look at people who I aspire to, who are doing a great job, and I think, man, like they're really nailing it, what I see is that they choose something and really amplify it. And I'm going to talk a little more about that, but they sort of choose a direction and amplify it. And that's how they build this strong connection with people. So it's not about what they chose to amplify. It's about putting that stake in the ground. Dunkin Donuts versus Starbucks, both of those are positioned very strongly, right? Dunkin Donuts is a fun, lovable, friendly, accessible brand, right? It's like the person next door. Starbucks is all about aspiration and great coffee, and they have baristas, and the types of coffee are names that are not in English. So it's an elevated brand, right? It's very much a little looking down, not looking down on you, but certainly it's an aspirational, elevated, and authoritative brand. So when it comes to you, what you want to think about is what naturally brings your brand across smartly. And that's how you want to really be building your personal brand. Always keep in mind, 1 billion names are Googled every day. 1 billion names are Googled every day. So the starting point of building your personal brand should be with Google. And I'm going to ask you now to go to Google and type in your name and see what shows up. Now, if you have a really common name, like maybe you're John Smith, you could think about how would someone try and find you? It could be John Smith author. It could be John Smith and the city you live in. It could be John Smith and the name of your business. So if you have a really common name, think about what might help someone to find you specifically. But go and Google yourself and see what comes up and share back in the chat. Is it good? Is it meh? Like meaning it's okay, or is it bad? The reason it's helpful to Google yourself is this is like the starting point that most people have when they want to learn about you. So step back and think, if someone were Googling me and these are the results that they saw, what would they think? And I'm going to show you how to build a brand that makes sure that you are going to look awesome when somebody searches for you. Of the 75 US adults who Google themselves, nearly half say the results are not positive. So 75% of adults are Googling themselves. Half of them don't like the results. Here's the thing. This is a solvable problem. I showed you my personal brand. Every single thing you see is just stuff I put on the internet about myself. So it's really just what we're saying about ourselves. But something I would encourage you to do, you're Googling yourself now, which is great. Also step back for a second and put an entry in your calendar to Google yourself every 3 or 6 months, just so you can see if anything negative or questionable is coming up. I had a meeting a number of years ago with a guy. He was a CEO of a company, and I was meeting him for a coffee. And so I wanted to just see what he looked like, so I knew how to find him. So I Google his name, and what comes up at the top? An article about someone with his name assaulting a security guard in an apartment building. Now, I don't even know if it was him or not, right? There was no pictures. It was someone with his name in the same city. But all I'm thinking in this meeting is like, is this guy a psychopath? Is he like aggressive? Did he really do this? He seems normal though. That's what you don't want to have happen. So it's helpful to know. And eventually him and I became better friends. And I asked him, like, have you ever searched your name? Because you know what shows up. And he was like, oh my gosh, that was something that happened in my 20s, et cetera, et cetera. But he didn't know that that was even there. And if I'm finding it, chances are many other people are as well. So it's helpful to know this is kind of like setting the stage for what people are seeing about you. The other thing that you want to think about is, what do people say about you when you leave the room? What do people say about you when you leave the room? And one of your best tests of the strength of your personal brand, this is something I always do in workshops that I do in person, is I'll have everyone meet someone new, right? So you meet someone new and you introduce yourself. 15 minutes later, I have them reconnect, but they introduce the other person to themselves, right? So the first time, let's say I'm meeting with John, And John tells me about himself. I tell him about myself. We wait 15 minutes, we go back, and I have to say, I'm John. And what do I remember that John told me, right? The idea here is that a strong brand is what happens when somebody else needs to convey your brand to somebody. And something that I realized when I got started in personal branding is that I had a really weak brand. So back when I had started my company, Bootcamp Digital, I went to a networking event. And, at networking events, everyone asked, well, what do you do? And so I didn't want to pigeonhole myself and say, well, I do social media. So instead, I was like, well, because I had worked at Procter & Gamble, so a big company, for 5 or 6 years in branding. So I was like, well, right now I'm doing a lot of social media, but I have branding background and I've done this, and I list like 10 things. If I were to leave that conversation and you were to go over to that person and say, hey, I saw you talking to Krista. What does she do? That person would have said, I don't know, maybe something with marketing, which is horrible, right? That's horrible branding. So what I realized is that I need to focus on being able to present myself in a way that somebody can figure out what I do and remember it. And I'm going to show you the exact strategies that will lead you to that solution. But essentially, your brand is what people say when you leave. And what's important to keep in mind is this is logical and emotional. So it could be, well, Krista is like an expert on digital, but also, how did they feel? What resonated with them about how I presented myself? And so it's really what somebody will say or think or feel after you leave the room. So that's what we're focusing on, because at the end of the day, people do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. And so your personal brand needs to touch all 3 of these elements. They need to know you, meaning you're memorable. People need to like you, and they should trust you. So I was reading a book about sales. I like to preface this because I don't just read books about how to make people like me, but I was reading a book about sales, and it said, likability is really important in sales because people just want to work with people they like. And one of the things it said that I still remember is that people like you more the more they see you. This is literally true. So if you meet 2 people, you like them both the same amount, then you start to see one person more. You actually like that person more and you trust that person more just because you've seen them, even if the interaction isn't positive. So it can't be negative, but a neutral interaction where somebody is seeing you more often makes you more likable and more trustworthy. Think about the pack of gum you pick up in a store at a checkout aisle. That pack of gum, it feels like an impulse purchase, but it's that you've seen the ad for it a gazillion times. And that makes it trustworthy, you know it, and ideally you like it if that's the one you're choosing. So the same is true with people. So the reason I like to mention this in personal branding is because there's 2 key insights you should take away from this. The first is that visibility is a key part of your personal brand. And the more you can increase your visibility, the more successful you will be. The second thing is that you cannot just make your personal brand about a professional context. People want to get to know you. They want to work with people they like and feel connected to. If you think back to the beginning of my presentation where I show you my horrid MySpace page and my awesome first blog, why do I do that? Other than maybe it's funny, but why do I do that? It builds a connection point, right? Many of us have had, non-flattering things on social media. I'm also giving you a little bit of a window into my personal life, even though it was from 15 years ago. But you're still getting that little peek inside, right? And that's what breeds likability. So we want our personal brand to span all of those areas. So there are 3 steps to building a personal brand: define, design, and deliver. Defining your personal brand is the first step. This is kind of what are you all about and what do you want? The second step is designing your brand. How do you make your brand compelling and desirable to people? And then the third is delivering your brand. How do you amplify yourself and grow your visibility? And I'm going to give you some key insights on each of these three stages that you can use to increase your personal brand effectiveness. The first is defining your brand. Here you want to, I mentioned earlier, make sure you have a pen and a paper. Write down what is it you want for yourself. And it could be in the next 1 year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, whatever line of sight or visibility you have. What is it that you want to achieve? Do you want to sell more books? Do you want to write a book and have an audience that's excited to buy it right away? Do you want to grow your visibility or become a thought leader within an industry? Would you like to speak at events? Do you want to be featured on news sites? Would you like to be running workshops about what it is that you do? Do you want to be seen as, a core author that other people respect and are waiting for the next book that you have coming out? What is it that you want? And write down, you may have general ideas or you may have specific ideas, but figuring out what you want is really important. And the more specific you can be, the better. Let me tell you a story about how this worked for me. I've been thinking about my personal brand for a long time. And when I started thinking about my personal brand, I kind of said, okay, I need to be about these things. And I created a website and I had a big social media presence. And if somebody said, well, what are you doing all this for? What do you want? I would just say, well, I want to be seen as a social media leader. Then I was doing a workshop on digital marketing strategy. And I was talking about how to be strategic and really focus, like, what do you actually want though? What is your real goal, right? And someone in the class was doing the workshop through the context of their personal brand. And they said, well, I just want people to know I'm good at this. And I said, but why? Like, what specific opportunities do you want? And they said, well, I would like to speak at events. I would like this. So anyways, they made the list. And I stepped back and said, I do all this work to build a presence, but what do I actually want from it? Right? What am I getting out of it? So I set a specific goal. I said, I want to get more paid speaking engagements. And that was my goal at the time, was paid speaking engagements. So then I was able to actually look at, okay, how could I get more paid speaking engagements? And I realized I need to get in front of meeting planners more. And so I reached out. There's a group called Meeting Planners International. I reached out to them and I was like, hey, I'm a branding expert and a social media expert. I would love to do a webinar for you. I probably emailed them 7 times. Never heard anything back. Then when I had this focus, so I had emailed them over years, trying to get in with them, never got any response. They were not interested in me at all. Then when I started building my brand and I said, I want to get speaking engagements, I knew that I needed to get in front of meeting planners. So I joined some LinkedIn meeting planner groups. I shared tips on how meeting planners could use social media better, how to get your speakers to share your event and grow your visibility, all these different tips. So I focused it on meeting planners. And you know what happened? After 2 months, they messaged me and were like, hey, Krista, we love all the content you're sharing in our group. Do you think you could do a webinar for us? I'm like, yeah, check your email from the last 3 years. So the thing of it is that what I was able to do by being specific about what I wanted, the opportunities came to me. And so that's why it's helpful, rather than just keeping it vague. Well, I'd like to sell more copies of my book. Okay, but like, what specific things would you like to have happen to do that? Right? Is it that you want to get media appearances? Think about those things so that you know specifically what you want. So what you want to figure out is, what is it that I exactly want? Write that down, and you can refine this over time. If I think about 10 years ago, what I would have said my 5 and 10-year goals are, they're very different now. But the more focused you are, the more likely you are to achieve the results that you want, because you'll be deliberate in your efforts. So start by being clear on what it is that you want. That's our define step. The second step is design. Now we get into, well, how do you make your brand compelling and desirable to people? And here we're going to use the principles that the biggest brands in the world use, and we're going to harness those exact same things. So my background started off at Procter & Gamble, arguably the world's best branding company. And when I started teaching personal branding about 7 or 8 years ago, I realized that what makes a strong personal brand is exactly the same as what makes a strong brand that you buy in the store. And so after research, interviewing people, we narrowed it down to 4 things. And it's really easy to remember them because the acronym is MADE. So your personal brand needs to do 4 things. First, it needs to be memorable. Second, it needs to be authentic. Third, it needs to be differentiated. And fourth, it needs to be educated. So when it comes to memorability, one of the things that is really important is to be specific and simple. So I told you earlier about how I would go to this event and people would say, "What do you do?" And I would list 100 things, right? I've consistently met people like the old me at events. I met someone, they gave me a business card, and I kid you not, what they did, social media, voiceover, actor, branding specialist. There were 10 different things on that card. So what do I think? I think this person isn't good at anything. So the way that I got better at this was, instead of saying, well, I can do this and this and this, I got specific and I made it simple. I'm a social media expert. That was, 12 years ago where my personal brand was. So this was the early days of social media. Now, arguably, there are many of them, but this was in the early days. So it could be that simple. I'm an expert in social media, specific and simple, and people can remember that. Here's why this is so important, is because one of the biggest ways you get opportunities is through word of mouth. And if people can't articulate who you are and what you do, they cannot recommend you for anything. So I had a friend, he was looking for a job, and I was like, cool, send me what you do so I can see if anyone in my network would be a fit to introduce you to. And he sent me this long email, and we work in a similar area. I'm not joking. I couldn't understand what this guy did. And he works in the same area as me. So then I cannot recommend anyone for him to connect to because I don't even understand what he does. So the more simple and specific you are, the easier it is for other people to also amplify your voice, but the more memorable you are. Another example of this is I went to a networking group called Business Networking International, and they have sort of this set formula for how they run their events. And everyone gets 60 seconds or 90 seconds on a timer to introduce themselves. 60 to 90 seconds on a timer. And so I'm getting a little anxious thinking okay, what do I say that I do? And these people have been coming to this event for a long time. And what was amazing to me is the accountant stood up and he's like, I'm an accountant. And right now I'm specializing in construction. And I've specifically figured out how to get my construction clients more deductions based on some grants that they probably don't know about. So if you know anyone in construction, please send them my way. Now, if we step back from why that's so powerful, it's because there's many accountants, right? But if I want to refer someone to him, if someone's like, oh, I need an accountant, maybe I would think of him, but there's probably 5 other people. By saying, well, I'm an accountant specializing in construction, now I'm thinking, oh, I know a couple people with construction agencies. I bet he could help them. And so this also comes down to this differentiation point, right? Where the more unique you are and the more differentiated you are, the more you will stand out. So memorability is about being specific and consistent, but then you also need to ask yourself, how am I differentiated? What makes me different than other people doing similar things? And this can be hard. For me, this takes a little while even for me to think through. And, personal branding is a journey, so you don't have to have all of the answers today. And some things you'll do well right now, some things you won't do so well. That's okay. Focus on your strengths and keep building over time. But one of the things that really strikes me about being differentiated is I was reading something, and this was about branding in general. But somebody said, what really is your point of difference? Why would someone choose you versus someone else? And, I know this because I teach it, I do marketing, but it really made me think, have I articulated this well enough? And there's a book on business strategy called Blue Ocean Strategy. And the idea is to design yourself, your brand, in a way that you are the best, the biggest, the something-ist within your industry. So if I think of Bootcamp Digital, like my company, we do digital marketing training. And I was thinking about this, like, okay, but what do we actually do better than anyone else? We've done a lot of branding work. And if you ask us, we have this graphic with 4 things and whatever, but I'm like, what is it? And actually, when I thought about it again, I said, well, we have the deepest and broadest library of digital marketing topics, period. No one else has the same content breadth and depth that we have. If you go to a LinkedIn Learning, they have a lot of different topics, but they don't cover them deeply. If you go to our competitors, they typically have a small group of products, but they don't have the range that we have, which allows us to customize. So your difference needs to be what makes you stand out versus other people. If I think about myself from the context of being a speaker, for example, to me, it's about the practicality of what I teach, right? I tell you, get a book at the beginning because I want you to write down ideas and things you can literally go and do. So what you want to be thinking about is what is it that really makes you stand out and different? And that is going to help people to recommend you to others. I always like to, when I think about being different, I always like to use the example of photographers because it's very relatable. But let's say you need a photographer to take a picture of your new baby. And you come to me and I'm like, oh yeah, I love photography. I can do great landscape, baby pictures, product photos. I do everything. While I'm shooting your baby pictures, do you also have a business? Because I could take product shots while I'm there. What does that sound like? And how much would you be willing to pay that person? Versus all I do is take pictures of babies. All day long, all I think about is babies. I practice ways to make them laugh. I practice ways to make them look cute. I have specific lighting techniques that I use, and I even know the toys to bring to make them happy. So when you work with me, you're going to get the best baby photographs on the market. How much would you pay for that? So that's what we want to be thinking about in terms of how we bring our brand to life. Now, there's a few elements that I want you to be aware of in terms of how you bring your brand to life, especially online. And the first is consistency. Be consistent in how you present yourself. I mentioned earlier that every photo basically looks exactly the same of me that I put online. Now, in my real life, sometimes my hair is down, sometimes I have no makeup, sometimes I don't wear jewelry, right? I look different. But in any professional stuff I post, I usually look fairly similar. I have some variations, but I look fairly similar. Why is that? Well, look, there are many people in a space, but by looking different or by being unique, you can build that with consistency. A friend of mine, Saul Colt, he also is like a personal branding genius. He wears these like ridiculous pants when he speaks. And what that does is it makes him more memorable. Now, if he wore the pants one time but not the other, would it be as memorable? Probably not. So you want to be consistent in things that are going to make you more memorable. And if you start looking at some of the biggest leaders in the world, you'll see that they're all doing this. They're looking consistent to build that memory structure. The other thing to think about is what can you incorporate in your interactions with people that's super memorable. So this woman, I heard her speak. If anyone's heard her speak before, just say yes in the chat. But I heard her speak at a women's entrepreneurship conference in Oklahoma, probably like ages ago. And I still to this day remember her. So she grew a business based on about selling buns, like literally she sells buns. And so she was, it was entrepreneurship. She's talking about this, but this lady comes out and, she has this plastic fake butt on her back. Like it looks like a naked butt, right? But it's obviously just like whatever attached. She's wearing clothing. So she has this like fake plastic butt on and she's like, I'm here to talk about my buns. And she turns around and everyone sees it. Big laugh, right? Super memorable way to introduce herself. So what you also want to think about is something that you're building into your interactions with people that is memorable and makes them remember you. Another friend of mine, Craig Paddock, when I met him, he said, I met him many years ago, and he was like, just Google the coolest guy in Kansas City, and I'll come up. And after I'd first met him, I couldn't remember his name. And I literally Googled the coolest guy in Kansas City, and look at us, there he is. This is slightly ironic because he's probably not very cool, but super funny and memorable way to ultimately brand himself and position himself. Something that I sometimes use, this is actually my father. This is his real photo. But something that I used when I started talking about social media, people would say, well, is social media a fad? Or, is it really something we need to think about? And I did this on the fly. This was years ago when social media was just starting up and someone said, well, is social media really important? And my dad had just joined. And I said, let me show you this. My dad lives in Canada. He can only access Wi-Fi through dial-up, like literally true story. He lives on a farm. He has dial-up internet. And he just joined Facebook. So yes, everyone is joining Facebook. And yes, my dad is an Elvis impersonator, although apparently the correct term is tribute artist. So I show this and everyone starts laughing because my dad's an Elvis, right? Which is kind of hysterical. And so I see that people laugh. It's getting a little bit of, a kick. So then I use it again at another presentation. And 3 years later, I get an invitation to speak at a national event. And as I'm talking to them to prepare, the one girl said, she's like, I saw you on a webinar 3 or 4 years ago. And I was in tears of laughter as you talked about your dad's Elvising and his Elvis profile. And so the thing is, maybe that's a bit of a stick or a hook, but something memorable, start looking for these things, right? So how do I know that making fun of my dad's Elvising, no offense to the Elvi out there, but how do I know that, making some jokes about this is going to get results? Well, I see feedback. And then when I know people like it, I build it into more stuff. That's how you want to be thinking about your personal brands. Look for feedback and build that in. The other thing that I'll leave with you is really make sure that your brand is authentic. This is something that's really required if you want to actually connect with people. So sometimes we look at other people we aspire to and feel like, oh, we ought to be like them. Someone once told me about my personal brand. He was like, the way you have your hair back looks very harsh. And I was like, okay, maybe that's fair. And then he showed me other people like Marie Forleo and some of these people who have this beautiful whatever hair, right? And I was like, that's not the style I'm going for. I am a little more aggressive in my delivery style. I am a little different in the way that I want to come across. And if I try and make myself be something I'm not, I don't think I'll be as successful and it won't feel very good. So always make sure that you're integrating yourself and your strengths. And one of the ways to do this is to establish a clear tone of voice. So the tone of voice is really, okay, how do you come across? I have 2 examples for you here. One is Rachel Ray and one is Martha Stewart, right? They're both basically doing the same stuff. They sell cooking stuff and recipes to people. They've both built huge million or billion-dollar brands off of their own personal selves. Right? Rachel Ray, we've got Rachel's hubby John's fave dish, carbonara, added saffron and shrimp to make it extra delicious. And then we see Martha Stewart. This classic chicken fricassee, I don't know if I'm saying this right, turns humble ingredients into a heartiest dinner. Very different tones of voice. Both work. Both appeal to different people in different ways. So one of the things that you want to establish for yourself is a clear tone of voice. How do you want to come across? What should it look like and feel like? And as you think about your tone of voice, what you want to focus on a little bit is really, how do I want to sound to people who are thinking about me? What do I want them to take away when they've connected with me? And really try and hone in on that tone of voice that's going to work for you, because that way you'll build consistency and memorability. If you see me speak one time and, like in this, I'm making some jokes, I'm trying to be relatable. And then you see me speak another time, and maybe I'm super casual and I'm wearing something different. You're not going to remember who I am very well. So you want to have a clear tone of voice so people can really remember you. That brings us to step 3, visibility. Deliver your brand, amplify your brand, and make some noise. So how do we do this? The first step is to create an elevator pitch. How do you introduce yourself to people? Now, I told you already, get a pen and paper, try and write down what your elevator pitch would be right now. How would you introduce yourself to someone right now? And then ask yourself, does this make people want to get to know you better? Does it highlight your accomplishments? Are they like, oh, wow, I need to connect with this person? So let me tell you a story about this. Back when I had just left Procter & Gamble, I was starting my own business and I really didn't know what I was doing, right? And I'm at a networking event and people are like, oh, hi, who are you? What do you do? And I would be like, I do social media. And that's all I would say, right? And I did feel a little like, yeah, no one seems very interested in me. And sometimes we think that it's something about us, right? Like it's an inherent trait, like I have boringness on my face or my personality is crappy. No, it's that I'm not putting my best foot forward. So people would say like, oh, what do you do? And I would just say, yeah, I do social media. And, maybe we would have a conversation or whatever. But then I was with a friend of mine and we're talking to a group of people in his network. And he was like, oh, let me introduce you to Krista. Krista's a former Procter & Gamble executive, and she's one of the biggest authorities right now on social media. She's actually speaking at this conference today. And you should really check out her book on the topic as well. And suddenly, people were like, oh, wow, right? Suddenly I was taken seriously. And I really had a moment because I'm like, okay, I can't bring this guy with me everywhere. Like he has a life, presumably, but I need to figure out how to do this on my own. I need to figure out how, when someone is connecting to me or when I have an opportunity to present myself to someone, they say, wow, I need to learn from this person. I want to work with this person. I want to buy her book. Right? That's what I need to work out, whether it's the headline on my LinkedIn profile, how I introduce myself when I'm speaking on a podcast or in a networking event or a virtual networking event these days. How am I introduce myself? And how do I let people know what my accomplishments are? This is your elevator pitch. And there's a lot of different ways it can manifest itself. But one of the things to consider with your elevator pitch is not just to highlight your accomplishments, but also make it mission-based. So mission-based means, how do you actually serve other people or the world by what you do? So if I said, well, I'm great at social media, that's nice. But if I'm actually doing something that makes the world better, maybe more people are likely to get on board. So when people say, hey, Krista, what do you do? I can say, actually, my mission is to help businesses grow by empowering them to take advantage of digital marketing. And I've done this by writing 6 books. I speak all over the world. And I really want to help businesses to get the results that they deserve, because so many of them don't take advantage of this powerful tool well enough. And I love that I get out of bed every day and help them. Would you want to help me do that? Would you want to work with me? Would you say, okay, this person knows what they're doing? Hopefully, yes. And this is something that you'll work on and improve over time. So one of the things about my personal brand is that I've worked to build it and create it and improve it a little bit over time. Even if you look at my introduction slides, right? So you see I have my media appearances and my books. Years ago, I was at a conference and they were introducing the other speaker. And so as they're introducing him, they're like, oh, this is so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. He's been featured on, and they say all these news sites. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like, okay, first of all, when they announce the news sites, everyone's like, ooh. So I see people care. And I'm thinking about myself and I'm like, man, that's not in my bio, right? We give the introducers our own bios. I could put anything I want in that. Mine is not nearly as good as his, right? Mine is like, oh, Krista loves social media, blah, blah, right? I don't know what it said. It was not as fancy. People weren't like, ooh, when mine was read. So what did I do? Well, I took his idea and I threw it in my own bio, right? Now, if you go to like my website where I have my bio, I list my media appearances, I list my clients, and I list my books, because those are the three things that people are like, ooh, and they really take seriously. Now, you may not have clients, you may not yet have books, or maybe you do, and you may or may not have media appearances. But first, you can work on establishing those things. So if you say, well, I really want to grow my media presence, great. There's easy ways to work on it, especially with local media. But then secondly, you can just listen to other people and how they do things, and where do you get that wow factor, and then how do you integrate similar stuff into yours. And this elevator pitch is going to get better and better and better and better the more you do it. So really think about creating an elevator pitch that makes people say, ooh, I need to work with that person. They could really help me. And refine until you get it right. I noticed for me, some of you may be saying like, oh, I don't know how comfortable it feels, braggy. Great. Find something you do feel comfortable with, right? So in some settings, I won't talk about books or whatever. I'll just be like, I actually help businesses all over the world to get better results from their digital marketing, because I feel like they really can unlock growth by doing it. And then later in the conversation, I might just be like, yeah, when I wrote, I think it was my 5th book, I found this out, right? So I know what's going to impress people. And I also look for little ways to drop it in so that I don't have to, come across too braggy. But you want to practice and perfect this, because also as you grow your visibility, more people are going to ask what you do and how you serve people. And so this is certainly very helpful. So for me, if somebody says, hey, Krista, what do you do? I want to be able to convey that in a concise and compelling way. And I always think on podcasts, people say, hey, what do you do? And I got a compliment one time after the show. The woman said, most people ramble on for like 5 minutes and you still don't really know what they do. She was like, you had 3 sentences. And then you stopped. And I'm like, yeah, because I've thought it through a little bit better. So really think about your elevator pitch and how you bring that to life. And if it's not where you want it to be, don't worry. You're going to get better and better and better. And one of the things to consider, and this is from Simon Sinek. So I mentioned the mission side of it, but Simon Sinek, and he has a great TED Talk. You can Google Simon Sinek why to find it. But what he says is that there's what you do, there's how you do it, and then there's why you do it. And the why is what connects with people, right? So what I do, digital marketing training, how I do it, this is what makes my approach better or different. But why I do it is what people really care about. So even if I'm writing nonfiction books, why do I do it? How does it serve people? How does it make the world better? Right? Maybe I'm helping, I'm writing books that young people love to read because I know reading enriches their lives and grows empathy. What is your why? And that's going to really be what resonates with people as you think about your elevator pitch and bringing it to life. So as we think about online branding, I talked about your elevator pitch. As we think about online branding, you also want to think about establishing a strong presence. And the first step is to audit yourself. I do this periodically. And when I got started on Instagram, I was auditing myself and I looked at my Instagram profile, and I kid you not, every picture was of alcohol. Every single picture was alcohol. And why not? Like, martinis are kind of beautiful. But I was on Instagram. It was the early days. I do digital, so I felt I needed to be there. And apparently that's all I had to share. And so, I do still enjoy a martini. I still want to take a picture of that. But I want my brand to really reflect who I am. By auditing it, by stepping back and Googling myself, looking at my accounts, I thought, well, what would someone think of me if they came to this Instagram account? And so now I try to be more strategic. I post some stuff from events, I post some work stuff, and I still share the personal things that are really happening, but I have more balance. So I'm bringing my brands to life. When you're auditing yourself, look at your Facebook page. Even your personal Facebook page can be found typically. And some of your content, you'd be surprised at what people could find. They can usually see the pages you've liked, for example. I had a business networking event coming up and I Googled somebody and it showed their Facebook profile. Even though I wasn't friends with this person, I could see the stuff they liked. And there was a lot of stuff they had liked related to drugs. And I thought, we all have our personal lives, but anyone can see this. And this person clearly hadn't thought about that. So make sure you know what people can and can't find and adjust your privacy settings to reflect that. Then what you want to do is build and amplify a strong presence online. And there's a lot of different tools that you can do that you can use to do this. If we think about from a personal brand site perspective, the main things you would want to think about, we have a lot here, right? Facebook, Instagram, website, blog, article sites, YouTube, SlideShare, Twitter, community building, LinkedIn. Maybe you could even add like Snapchat and TikTok if your audience is younger. There's so much you could do. But I'm going to give you advice that most people will not give you, which is choose one thing and master it. Forget this mindset that you need to have a presence everywhere. A website, if you're serious about building your brand, a website is always a good foundational investment. But then think strategically about what you're going to do. Where is your audience? Where can you connect with them? One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make, and honestly, I make this myself all the time, is that they try to do too much. And none of it is really getting traction. They spin their wheels by just posting mediocre content everywhere. You know what? There's people making $1 million just unboxing stuff on YouTube. There's people making $1 million by being Instagram influencers. Do you think an Instagram influencer is like, oh, but my Facebook page isn't really good and I really should consider LinkedIn? No, they only care about Instagram. And we are seeing the rise of LinkedIn influencers who are building huge influence on LinkedIn. So choose one platform where your audience is and that works for you and really focus on maximizing it. I do want to give you a few quick tips on LinkedIn, since this is probably where most of your professional presence will take place. So we already know LinkedIn is the #1 professional network. This is where people are going to find you. I gave you some tips about having a great photo, so hopefully you're ready for that. The second thing you want to focus on is your headline or description. This is your opportunity to test out your elevator pitch. How does this work if your elevator pitch is on LinkedIn? Does that resonate with people? Does that make you look good? So this is one of our trainers, 20 plus years in digital marketing, trainer, speaker, coach, helping responsible businesses grow. She has a heart and a picture of Earth, right? That's probably relevant for her brand. For me, I have a bit of a different style, right? I probably wouldn't have the same tone, even just in a headline. But look at other people's headlines to see what are you seeing there? What are people posting? And that will give you some ideas about not just your elevator pitch, because you can refine it, but how do you bring that elevator pitch to life? Who do you help and how do you help them? Another big opportunity for LinkedIn is videos. Videos are really, really powerful, and you want a video to be 1 or 2 minutes long for LinkedIn. If you really are serious about personal branding, get serious about video. Video, we say a picture's worth 1,000 words, so then what's a video worth? 1,000,000 words? Start posting videos on LinkedIn and other social channels, because that's where you can really connect with people. Take this presentation. I could give it to you all in words, and I have, right? I literally wrote a book. You could read this whole book, and that is not the same as connecting with me through video. You seeing me speak here is really creating a different level of connection that I could never convey in words. So look at adding video into any platforms that you participate in. So what should you do next? The first thing is what not to do. Don't wait for excuses, or don't wait for perfection. Don't make excuses and don't delay. I did a presentation once and someone said, well, I've been hesitant to add to my LinkedIn network because I don't like my profile picture. One, who cares? Like, you can improve it, but whatever. But two, like, look, just get a phone, do your makeup one day and take a bunch of pictures. It'll look great. But we sometimes make excuses. We sometimes wait for perfection. Oh, I'll do this when this happens. Well, once my book goes live, then I'm going to start thinking about it. No, it will never be perfect. Start now and start connecting with people, because this is where you really have the opportunity. So what I'd like you to do, hopefully you have your pen and paper handy, is write down the one or two things that you're really going to work on. Is it your elevator pitch? Is it defining those made elements? Is it establishing your LinkedIn presence? Is it building a website? Is it getting some great videos or getting in the habit of launching videos on LinkedIn? Write down two things that you can do immediately so that you're ready to get started in building your brand online. With that, if you have any last minute questions, feel free to type them in. As you can see, I have a ton of passion for this topic, and I'm happy to dig under the hood and tell you what really works. But feel free to connect with me on social media. So if you have any questions, I'll kind of monitor it for the next couple minutes to see if those come through. But feel free to connect with me and Bootcamp Digital on social media. I always love to see the insights and takeaways you have. Hopefully you've shared some, tag me and ReadersMagnet so we can see the key insights you're taking away from this session. But with that, I would like to thank you so much for joining me. If you start getting your brand to life online, feel free to tag me. Show me what you're doing. I would love to see your success and honored to be, a part of it to help you be thinking about this better, because this is a topic that's an endless thing that we can always get better at. And what we're doing is we're paving the way for our future. So with that, thank you so much for joining me. It has been an absolute pleasure. I believe next up, there's a 30-minute break. So you can take a break, refill your beverages, or check out some of the booths, see what's going on in the virtual exhibit hall. And the next session will get started in about 30 minutes. So thank you so much for joining me. It has been a real pleasure, and I'll look forward to connecting with you online. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great day.